Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second series of our autumn webinar series for farmers in the Sligo, Leitrim, Donegal region. My name is James Keane. I'm the Teagasc Regional Manager in Sligo, Leitrim, Donegal, and tonight we're covering a topic which I think is very important to everyone at this time of year. I think over the last long weekend there's a lot of cattle going into houses. There's a lot of weanlings going in and store cattle and cows and calves. So it's very timely. We're always trying to cover topics that are timely and important for our local farmer clients and everyone out there, all the farmers in the Northwest. So tonight we're joined by Brendan Caslin, Dry Stock Advisor in the Ballymote office, and we're also joined by Joe Mahon, an Education Officer in the Ballymote office also, and they're going to deal with the cattle and parasite control at housing. Just, I suppose, to make you aware, we will be taking questions at the end of the webinar. Each of our panelists will speak for about 20-25 minutes, and we'll take questions at the end. Just to remind you all, folks, that the Q and answer tab is at the bottom of the screen. You can see there, and you can submit your questions, and we'll ask Brendan and Joe the questions at the end of the webinar. So look, without any further ado, we'll move on, and we'll call on Brendan to start. So you can share your screen there, Brendan.
Sound, yeah. Thanks, James. So just to introduce myself, first of all, my name is Brendan Caston. I'm a dry stock advisor here based in Ballymote in County Sligo. So an overview of my presentation tonight is dealing with liver fluke in cattle, rumen fluke in cattle, and also external parasites. So that would entail sucking lice, biting lice, and mange mites. So it's a lovely topic to be talking about, and I hope everyone has their dinner digested before I start talking about this sort of stuff. So as a basic introduction, every animal on the farm needs to be growing or producing at their full potential. It's a very important part of farming. There are huge costs involved in housing cattle in sheds for the winter. So you'll be talking about silage, meal, your own labor, your time. And ideally, if you can eliminate parasites, then the cattle that you have in your sheds won't bring these parasites to grass the next year. It's the ideal opportunity to break the life cycle, as I have there on the 4th point, and clean them out, and that when they go to grass, then they're ready to hit the ground running and thrive. So the first topic that I'll be talking about is liver fluke. So it's on nearly every farm in the west of Ireland. Our region here, Sligo, Leitrim, Donegal, suckler cow country, beef country. So every farm in the west of Ireland has some wet spot. We all have them. And if you have a wet spot, you'll have mud snails. If you have mud snails, you'll have liver fluke. That's normal. So if you're slaughtering cattle, use the beef health check report from the meat factory. It's a very handy document to get. You get it when you slaughter your bullocks, your heifers, cull cows, etc., and it'll give you a readout of the liver fluke situation in the livers of the animals. They're scored 1 to 3. You can also see this through from your ICBF account. So if you're registered with ICBF, you can get this set up for your account, and it'll produce the exact same information. Now, you might be a suckler farmer selling weanlings, we'll say up in Ballymote, Mart up the road, or Alfin, or wherever you're selling your weanlings. But the chances are you'll have some neighbour beside you with the exact same type of land who will be killing bullocks, heifers, cows, etc. And it's good to get the reports from them as well. Liver fluke has a complicated life cycle with 3 stages. So I just put up there on the right-hand side of the screen. You have early immature, which is 2 weeks, immature 7 weeks, and adults, which is 12 weeks. And there are different products and different active ingredients to kill the different stages of fluke. They're all different, and you react to them in different ways. So the next point there are 7 active ingredients to control them. And I'll go through each of the active ingredients quickly, just to give you an idea and some of the product names that are associated with them. So in that case, then you use your products at either 2, 7, or 12 weeks after housing. So you have to give them a chance to mature. So the first screen there now, and don't get too worried about the active ingredient names. They sound very fancy and scientific, but the first one there, number 1, is Triclobendazole. So that sample products of that would be sort of Endofluke 10%, Fascinix 240, or Tribix 10%. And their dose would be generally 2 weeks after housing. So you're going to hit the early immatures, the immatures, and the adult fluke, so all 3 stages. Those 3 products are all oral drenches. They're not pour-ons or injectables, and their withdrawals for each of those 3 products is 56 days. Now, one of the other reasons I brought up this particular slide is when farmers hear about, let's say, Teagasc advisors talking about rotation of let's say, fluke treatments, what we mean by is rotation of the actual active ingredient, which would be your number 1 there, your triclobendazole. It's not rotation to say that I dealt with my cattle with endofluke last year, I'm going to change to Fasciola 240 this year, because they're actually the same active ingredient. So what we mean by rotating our products is rotating the active ingredient. Triclobendazole is a bit, of a warning, as there is leading to be resistant issues. I've gone down then to a different type of products, Cidecton Triclomax as an example there, which is a different product. It works 6 weeks after cows, we'll say stock or house. So that will kill immature and adult fluke, and it's a pour-on product. But the point I want to make with that one, if you look on the right-hand side, the withdrawal, it's 143 days, which is huge. So you're talking over 20 weeks of a withdrawal. And it's also a fluke and worm combi dose, and I'll talk about that in a few slides' time. Not suitable for cows. The second active ingredient I'm talking about is closanthal. So you'll be very familiar with the sample products at your co-op, your store, your veterinary shop. So first one there, just to give a rough example, Plasmin Injection. So that's a dose that you use 7 weeks after housing, and again, it kills the immature and adult fluke. It doesn't kill early immatures. It's an injection, and it's 49 days of withdrawal, so 7 weeks. The next product down, just the reason I put it on is because it has changed. So the first one was Closamectin Injection. The Closamectin pour-on, it's also 7 weeks, but if you look at the withdrawal, it has changed. It was 28 days, but it has moved up to 58 days, and you have to be careful on that when it comes to, deciding to kill bullocks, heifers, or cull cows, we'll say, that you don't kill within the withdrawal period, which is a month longer now. Now, third product there, and third active ingredient, and I put it up because it's kind of gone out of production now, is nitroxinil. A lot of us will be familiar with Teagasc. We would have used it for years and years on dealing with, we'll say, with young stock or whatever. Teagasc is the product that if you don't use the gloves on the hands and you rub it in, we'll say, under the skin, you look like you're smoking 200 cigarettes a day. It stains your hands. That dealt with immature adult fluke, and it was an injection, and the withdrawal was 60 days. I made contact with the company, and they have ceased production for the European market. So just be aware, if you go looking for that maybe next year, when you've used up the amount you have at the moment, it may not be there. Well, it won't be there. That's just a thing to bear in mind. Albendazole is another very common one, the active ingredient. A lot of people will be familiar with Albex 10% or Endospec 10%. That is an adult-only fluke killer. So you're talking about 10 to 12 weeks. It's an oral drench. The Albex 10% has a kind of a bluey tint in it, but the withdrawal is short. So that can suit some people. It's only 14 days. So if you had cattle that had a kind of a fluke problem, but they were within a month or 6 weeks of slaughter, we'll say, for example, that's a product that can be used because of the short withdrawal date. Chlorsolon now is the next active ingredient. Sample products there, Bimectin plus or Ivomec Super. They're kind of generics of each other. Again, for adult fluke, it's an injectable product. It's that bit easier to use than the drench, but it has a big withdrawal compared to the last product. You're talking 66 days, so almost a week over 2 months. So, excuse me. The next one then is Rifaxinoid. There is a bit of a question of availability of this product in the future. A common name for one of the products was Ridafluke, another adult fluke, and it was a drench. Now, the last product, and I'm kind of getting through this because it's heavy scientific stuff, is Oxyclosonide. Very important product. It's more to do with Rumen Fluke, but it does kill adult fluke, but we would be encouraging people not to use it to kill adult fluke. The two products in question are Levifast Diamond and Zanil. They both work at 10 to 12 weeks after housing. They're both oral drenches. Levivast has a 28-day kill for fluke and Zanal, or a withdrawal, and Zanal has a 13-day. But again, I repeat, we don't encourage this for adult fluke. You get some other product for dealing with adult fluke. Levivast and Zanal are designed for dealing with rumen fluke, and I'll go through them now in a few minutes. Now, this slide here, the colored slide here, it's just to give you a kind of an idea. The drug on the left-hand side is basically the 7 active ingredients I mentioned, from oxyclosonide up the top down to triclobendazole on the bottom. But on the right-hand side, it's more important to the colors. So it's the age at fluke in weeks on the right-hand side. So we'll say if you take the oxyclosonide there, the top product, if you wait, we'll say 9.5 weeks to 11.5 weeks, you're only going to get a 50 to 70% kill rate. If you wait till almost 12 weeks, you're going to get 80 to 99% of a kill rate. Compare that down to your triclobendazole, which is a much stronger, earlier acting product. If you go for 2 to 3 weeks, you'll get a 99% kill rate. If you wait to 3 weeks, you'll get almost a full kill, 99 to 100%. None of these products will go exactly 100%. So that's an important thing to remember. So a few things on the clinical signs of Fasciola hepatica, which is the Latin for liver fluke in cattle. It's a chronic disease in cattle. Generally, it affects in late winter or early spring. You can see decreased production. That can be more obvious in, we'll say, dairy herds, where it's very obvious with the milk jars to see the reduction in milk. But it also affects dry stock cattle, in that animals that aren't treated, we'll say, or have liver fluke, it's reduced production. The animals may not be thriving compared to animals that are clear of liver fluke to the same extent. So they could be putting on, we'll say, 0.1, 0.2 of a kilo, whereas their comrades that have been treated might be putting on 0.5, 0.6 or whatever, you know. Diarrhea is a positive and a negative, in that some animals show symptoms of diarrhea, but not all. So, but if you have it, if you have animals with diarrhea, there is a chance that it could be liver fluke. So a few kind of short points here. The important thing to remember, there is no immunity to liver fluke. There has been, as I said, resistance recorded to triclobendazole, and it's your choice then whether you use a pour-on, an injectable, or a drench. So that comes back to cost, convenience, and safety. So a pour-on is a very handy product to use. That, you know, it's an expensive way of doing it, but we'll say you might not have the ideal crush. You mightn't have the Star Wars crush, as I call it. It could be a very simple crush, no proper skull and gate or head scoop. Labor is, you know, could be limited. So pour-on is very handy, and I'd recommend you clip the animal as well, and I'll go through that in a few minutes. The injectable kind of is the second easiest one, for just lift the skin and inject under the skin. The drench now is probably the cheapest way of doing it, but again, it depends on your facilities at home. So if you have a decent crush, or you're handy at doing them, or we'll say you've got your head scoop and your locking gate, locking at the front of the crush, fair enough. But we all come across, and we all have heifers or bullocks, whatever, you know, the typical girl that'll put her chin on the concrete floor and you cannot get her up for love nor money. That's an important thing. So safety does come into it. It might cost you more with the pour-ons, but if you're happy to do that, it's a safer way of doing it. We always recommend dose to the heaviest animal. Inject ideally for intramuscular in the neck, not the rump. Now, Joe has a very good presentation on worms, and he'll go through that in detail. But I'm a kind of stickler for ideally injecting in the neck rather than the rump of the animal, because there is a risk of abscess, would say, developing if you routinely inject in the rump. And if you have replacement heifers, we'll say, on your farm, and you're treating them now, and they're on your farm, and eventually every animal that doesn't die in your farm ends up in a meat factory, and in a lot of cases, animals injected in the rump are that portion of the animal can be discarded for abscesses. So be careful on that one. Subcutaneous, which would be a lot of the fluke treatments, will be generally under the skin behind the shoulder. So get a spot on the animal that's the least valuable for treating them. I throw in a point here about the hook dosing gun. I have never used them myself personally, but I hear from clients that it's a handy tool for dosing animals. So It's a long dosing gun with a hook on it. You kind of stand behind the shoulder. You don't have to grab the lip of the animal, like we'll say, and then use your other hand to dose with. And it seems to work fairly well. Some people are happy with it, and I've actually noticed in the last few weeks in the farming press that if you buy 2.5, 4, 5 litres of a product, the company will give you a free gun. Another point there, generic products again. As Mary Harney said years ago, shop around. You can buy brand names if you want, but you can get a generic product with the exact same active ingredient for maybe half the price. If possible, try not to use combination products. So what we mean by that is a flucicide and a wormer on cows, because that can lead to resistance issues. Joe will talk in a good bit of detail now in a few minutes about dealing with worms, but generally suckler cows, which would be predominantly this part of the world, should have built up a resistance to worms, and you should be no need to be treating for a combination dose of fluke and worms in suckler cows. There may be there would be an argument for using it in young stock. That's fair enough. Now, nice thing to show you there after the dinner, the kind of general picture there on the left-hand side of the liver fluke. They're adult liver fluke on the left-hand side there. They're kind of like scallop shells, that's the best way to describe them, that move. And they the way they cause hassle is when they mature and start moving, they have a kind of a phytoskeleton within them, and the points of that move cut through the flesh of the animal. And that's what causes the problem. Dirty, dirty things. So now, I'll not go into much detail here about the liver fluke life cycle. I could spend 3-4 hours going through this scientifically. But the important point to remember with this is that the liver fluke needs the mud snail as a host, an intermediate host, to actually generate the life cycle of itself. So the liver fluke eggs infect the foot of the snail and create the next part of the life cycle, and that's generally what leads to the life cycle. But the point I'm making is every farm that I'm on, or my own farm and everyone else's farm, will have some wet spot. You will have mud snails there, and if you do have them, you'll have liver fluke. So just a bit on storing products and things there. Make sure to store your product correctly. Make sure your dosing gun or syringe are correctly calibrated. And Joe later on has some very good slides on calibrating, so I'm not going to run in on his area. Mix the product well. Some products will have residual activity, therefore you can treat for 2 to 3 weeks before housing. So again, that's very handy, we'll say, for weanlings or whatever, get them done a couple of weeks before you bring them in. And then it'll save having to do them and stress them out. But again, I don't want to encroach on Joe's area. Dairy farmers, there's an option there, we'll say, where they can test by using bulk milk samples for screening liver fluke. So they send off their milk sample, they sign up through their co-op, and then they send their sample to the lab for testing. So now that's kind of liver fluke covered. The next kind of topic then will be rumen fluke. So on most farms, it's not nearly as important as liver fluke. Generally, liver fluke is more of a problem across the country, we'll say, especially in the West, however, where it is a problem, it is a serious problem. If you have a problem with rumen fluke, you have a problem. The only control is Oxyclosonide. So it was the 7th active ingredient I talked about there a few minutes ago. Do not use this to treat liver fluke. As I said, it can kill adult liver fluke, but use some of the other products. It's adult rumen fluke don't cause the problem. It's actually the movement of the immatures. And I'll show you a few photographs of rumen fluke. So the only products, as I said, are Zanil or Levofast to actually kill it. You should only use these products with caution. Zanil or Levofast are very hard doses on animals. You can lead to a lot of scouring, especially if there's a serious problem, and there can be issues with deaths if the problem is very, very bad. The advice basically, if there's no visual issue, don't treat for rumen fluke, don't create resistance. Because if you over-treat for anything, you'll create resistance, and by creating resistance, you'll have either a liver fluke or rumen fluke that cannot be killed. Fecal egg counts have been popular in the BPS. Now, a lot of people would have put the BPS we'll say fecal samples in there before the end of September. But consult your vet regarding Rumen Fluke and the results, because in a lot of cases you need adult fluke or Rumen Fluke to generate eggs, and the fecal samples will pick up the eggs. So talk to your vet, and you don't want false negatives or false positives. So nice picture there. It's just a basic picture of a Rumen Fluke egg. Now, this is a more interesting one. As I said, I hope you've digested your dinners. This photo was taken in the Kilkenny Regional Veterinary Lab. It's a photograph of adult Rumen Fluke on the surface of the rumen. So I don't know if you can see it there. On the upper side, you can see undigested kind of silage, and below that there you have the kind of wall of the rumen. Rumen being the biggest of the 4 stomachs of the cow, rumen reticulum, omasum, and abomasum. The little red lads there, I describe them best as they're like kind of haws on a whitethorn that flowered there recently enough, or that we'll say went to fruit recently enough. Little red berry kind of things, but they are the actual matures. Just a few pictures. This is actually a black-whited cow that has been severely infected, and you can see skin and bone in a very bad situation. Anemia. So when you're dealing with the like a liver fluke, what they do is they basically eat the blood of the animal, and you can see loss of blood there, the whiteness of the gums, severe loss of blood there with the jaws there and the gums. Bottle jaw is a kind of a classic one, not to be kind of mixed up with timber tongue. But the only way knowing timber tongue is put your hand in underneath the tongue of the animal and feel for the lump. But that's a kind of that's a classic one of liver fluke, we'll say, the bottle jaw with that kind of pendulous fluid under the chin, and you can see the very dull eyes of that animal there. Now, so that's kind of covered rumen fluke. So the next thing to do is to deal with lice. So nice topic again to deal with. I always draw the short straw here at this job. 2 types in cattle. So you have biting lice, which feed on skin and hair, and then you also have sucking lice, which burrow into the skin and feed on the blood. They are 2 different lice, totally different. The heaviest infestations in late winter when housed, right? So they thrive when out of direct sunlight. So what happens is when animals are out during the summer on grass, the UV light of the sun basically reduces the population. And also when animals go out in springtime, they shed their winter coat and they shed a lot of the lice with them. Broken skin, it's an important one, can result in secondary infection. They're very annoying for cattle. Very annoying. You can imagine these lads crawling around on you. And I've kind of mentioned this topic at a few discussion groups, and what normally happens is after a few minutes you see people suddenly start scratching. So when cattle coats are thick, so going into the winter, we'll say after bad weather, there's a good thick coat. It's the ideal environment for cattle, for lice to breed on cattle. Close contact in cattle pens as well. So any cattle slatted pen, for example, you could have 5, 6, 7, 8 cattle, depending on the age. They're in close contact, they're rubbing against each other, and the lice move from one to the other. It's an important point to remember, adult lice cannot survive off cattle for more than a few days. They need the host to survive. So just an important thing. Treatment then, there's no immunity with lice. The life cycle of lice is between 2 and 3 weeks. They reproduce very quickly. So we'd encourage people to get in there early and treat the lice. If you wait sort of 6, 9, 12 weeks, whatever, you could have 5, 6 generations, and they multiply exponentially on the animal. So you could have a very clean animal to a very dirty animal in a very short period of time. And generally, if you use a product with greater than 3 weeks persistency, you'll control the infestation. The other thing, the very important thing, is treat every animal in the shed on the one day. Don't just deal with, we'll say, a couple of pens in the shed today and another couple of tomorrow, because what will happen is the ones with the unkill lice will just reinfect the others. So do the whole shed the one day. Don't introduce any new untreated animals, or you'll have to start all over again. So you're in the mart, you see a nice Charlie heifer in Elphin or Ballymote or wherever you're buying. You see a nice springer or something, you decide, I take a fancy to her, and you bring her home and you let her into the shed of animals that you've treated. The chances are she's picked up lice, she has lice, she'll spread it all over the place. So bring her home, isolate her, treat her, and then you can mix her in with the others. So, excuse me, treatment of lice and mange. Biting lice feed on the skin, hair, and snout skin of the cells of the animal. It affects all ages, and the treatment will be with macrocyclic lactones, porons, pyrethroids, your spot-on type products. Your sucking lice then are a different animal. They feed on the animal's blood, so they burrow into the skin and feed on the blood of the animal. It mainly affects younger stock in the first grazing season. So again, macrocyclic lactones, pyrethroids will kill them. Mange mites then, mange mites are caused by microscopic mites. They have about a 2-week life cycle from egg the whole way to mature, and then they reproduce again. That affects all ages of animals. And again, the same products that will kill biting, sucking lice will kill macrocyclic, or will kill the mange mites. So the treatment then, we'll say, it's important then, we'll say, to clip the backs of the cattle. So 2 runs of the clippers is what I kind of recommend against the grain. What I generally try to do at home is start at the bottom of the tail, work up at the grain, and go, we'll say, halfway down the back, and then start from the head and work back. And what I actually did was I brought in one of my own clippers here. Just, I don't know if anyone can see it, just to give people an idea. There's a difference between the portable clip. I don't know if that's coming on the screen there. Difference between the portable clippers and the plug-in or electric one. The portable ones, you can get them for kind of 350, 400 euro, depending on what you're getting. But the only issue is battery life, and it's just an important practical thing. So I've also got an example of a battery pack here. I don't know if people can actually see it there on the screen, but have at least 2 of them, because in my kind of history, and I found that you might get an hour and a half charge out of one, but be charging the second one, especially if you have a lot of animals to do. The advantage of them is that if you have cattle running around a yard where you have to bring your electric cable across it, you don't have to have that with your portable one. The plug-in ones are more powerful, but be careful about, plugs getting damp and things like that. And the other thing that when you're using the cable ones is, of course, if they're across a yard, they're a job to clean afterwards, because you have muck and dirt everywhere across them. So anyway, that's just a practical thing. What it does is it helps to keep the animals clean and sweat. So it also reduces part of the habitat for the lice and the mange. So they have less area to go in. And if you think it gives think about it, it gives the product a better chance to work. So thinking about long hair, if you put a pour on, we'll say on a dirty hide, it has to work its way through the dirt, through the long hair to get into the hide of the animal. Whereas if you have it clipped, it's straight onto the hide. Spot-ons and pour-ons are not the same thing. So again, we always encourage people to follow the directions on the boxes. Every product is different. Whatever it says on the box, follow those regulations. Only pour-on products are effective against biting lice. They don't get sucking lice. Injectable products are not effective against biting lice, right? So they're important points to remember. And a very simple thing for your own health, and the amount of people that don't do it, it never stops to amaze me. Always wear gloves when you're using pour-on type products. Because if you think about it's an insecticide really, and it's designed to go through the thick hide of a cow, or a bullock or a wen, and whatever. A hide of one of those animals could be 4 or 5 millimeters thick, to kill parasites. So you can imagine what it's going to do to you if you don't wear gloves. It'll fairly clean you out, so it will. Withdrawals then, and I'm kind of coming to the end of my presentation here now. So the question you have to ask, are the animals that you're dealing with young stock soon to be slaughtered, in calf, or for producing milk? So again, we'll say, take the last example for producing milk. You want to keep, we'll say, a product that, we'll say, has a very short withdrawal. Young stock, then again, you can get away with a longer withdrawal. Soon to be slaughtered, we'll say cattle, bullocks, heifers, cull cows, we'll say whatever. Obviously the shorter withdrawal there, but you still want to kill the parasites at the same time. So different directions for each, that's important to remember. Always read the label. I can't stress that enough. You know, just because the neighbor down the road used a particular product and you buy something that you think is the same, don't put down the same information he did or she did. Withdrawals can change. So as I quoted there in the first couple of slides, it can affect your Board B quality assurance audit and especially bonus payments. So we'll say if you put down the wrong withdrawal, if you're in the habit of using a particular product and it has changed and you keep putting down 30 days instead of 66, for example, you'll fail a Board B quality assurance audit. And that could be the difference between, we'll say, getting 12 cent a bonus, for example, on a good 400 kilo Charlie bullock is worth 48 euro. So if you're only killing 20 cattle a year, that's the guts of €1,000 loss. So just be careful on that one. Record all treatments in your remedies register. Handy to see when the withdrawal is complete. So again, it's a visual thing for yourself. Write it in. Then you don't have to be thinking, did I do that batch of bullocks or that batch of heifers 3 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago? Or you'll never remember. So write it down in your remedies register. You need it for your quality assurance audit anyway. And I'd encourage people to record it straight away. So ideally, we'll say if you treat your Wainlands, we'll say with a product for pour-on for lice, we'll say, for example, that evening, put it in the remedies register, and then all you have to do is forget about it. Get into the habit of doing it straight away and not being up half the night before a quality assurance, trying to match up receipts and dockets. You just do it, spend a couple of minutes at it, it's done, and forget about it. So just to summarize now, and so parasites can cause significant distress to animals. They're an awful thing on the hides, or would say within, internally or externally on animals. So get rid of them, kill them, let the animal thrive to the best of its ability and grow and be happy and healthy. Be careful of building populations of resistant parasites. That's what we don't want. We don't want, and we'll say it's not that the product is resistant, it's that the particular liver fluke or rumen fluke or lice or whatever is not killable. That's the handy way to explain it. Control with the correct product at the correct time, at the correct rate, with the correct equipment and technique. Bit of a mouthful, that. And just to wind up, there's a very good website, www.animalhealthireland.ie, and they have very good kind of fact sheets and information about dealing with all those kind of products. Good practical stuff as well. So that's me, and thanks for your attention, and I'll let you on to James again there, and we'll talk again with the questions. So I'm going to stop sharing, James.
That's great, Brendan. Thanks a million for that. Okay, I'm just going to look at. I'm just going to play a short video now. It's only a 2-minute video. It's just to give people, and we're always trying to inform people about health and safety issues on farms. So it's very important, and especially this time of year, I think everyone now is going to have cattle in sheds, and you're all going to be dosing and handling a lot of stock. So this is just a very short little video that we're going to play here, and we'll come back then to when Joel comes on. Okay, thank you.
Hello everyone. Anyways, my name is Joe, as James was saying. I'm an education officer here in Ballymote. I'm just going to continue on here. I'm going to be going through stomach worms and lungworms. So I suppose starting off, first and foremost, storage is the first point I'm just going to reiterate. Look, it's very important to have a safe place for your dose. And so the likes of an old fridge is a good example. Somewhere that's stored well, that you're avoiding spillages. It's in a safe place. Look, if you have it ideally in a place where it's not going to say freeze over the winter, that's very important too, because like those products would have to be got rid of as active ingredient wouldn't be of any use after that. Look, the drum itself, it's important, the basics of checking the expiry. Again, as a reiterating Brendan's point on withdrawals, keeping an eye on all of that in relation, especially if you're obviously in the business of finishing cattle, or whatever the case may be. Then look, physically shake it well and make sure it's ready for use. And then afterwards, make sure that you're recording everything. I suppose as soon as you record it, the better, because at least it's job done then, and you have all your ducks in a row when it comes to the likes of your quality assurance, audits, etc. That you have those boxes ticked. Even coming back, we just seen a brief bit on health and safety, as well as like with the animals. Obviously, it's important to get the job done right, but always kind of put yourself first. Even simple things, wearing gloves, all these chemicals, you want to keep them away from yourself as best you can. So I suppose PPE is important, and getting that extra bit of help at that time just to get the job done correctly and effectively. So I suppose the first question I'm kind of going to ask is, why do we dose? So I suppose the main kind of reason is it's a chance to clean out animals as we come into the winter period now. The benefits of that, then animals won't be a source of infection for pasture next year. Housing time, look, it's the most expensive time of the year for animals, and so you need them performing at that time. So it's very important that you're putting them in on a clean slate as such, and they're going in. They're going to be on silage. They're going to be getting, in the relation to weanlings, they're going to get their proportion of meal, whatever it may be, 1 kilo or 2 kilos a day. So you want to make sure that you're getting a return on that money that you're putting into them at that time of year as the costs go higher, because you're looking for that animal growth to maintain that performance, getting 0.6, 0.7 kilograms live weight gain per day, and ensuring that works. And I suppose where else the dosing comes into this is ensuring that we get an effective kill. So when we are looking at cleaning out these animals, we need to be getting a 95% kill to avoid resistance. Resistance is a big topic, a big word it's only going to get bigger and bigger as the years go on, because unfortunately time is against us, and the more we use products, the reality of it is the less effective we're going to be. So our main aim is to try and slow down that trend, and the ways in which we can do that is by changing the different active ingredients that we use on animals, varying them, and I'll go through a little bit of that in further detail. Just, I suppose, as regards the 95% kill, we have to realize, say for example, you're getting your 60%, 70% kill. With the 7% of your 30%, they're effectively resistant worms that are left there. The animals is going back out onto pasture, and when they're going to be excreting that onto pasture, and that's just going to further increase the likelihood of resistance on your farm. So resistance is a genetically inherited trait, so those worms will multiply, and as year on year goes, it's only going to get worse and worse. So it's very important that we use products that work on our farms individually, and I suppose we protect them. So we use them at different times, and we vary them to ensure that they keep working when they are effective for us at the moment. So it's just, I suppose, some of the different classes here. We can see there's a white box there, a yellow box, and a grey box, which we'll call a clear box. It's as close a colour as I could get to clear. So they're in the white. The white is basically your benzimidazoles, so they're your white drenches, wormers. Then you have your yellow, which is your levamizoles, so that's the yellow box. And then your clear box there is your macrocyclic lactones. So this is basically, it's a very important slide that we can, if we can get our head around it. It's just the 3 different categories that are there of the active ingredients. So just an example of your like benzimidazoles, that's the likes of your Albex, which is your Albendazole, your Levazoles is your Levicide, and then your Macrocyclic Lactones is the likes of your ivermectins. And look, there's different variants of that. You have the likes of your Doramectin, which is the likes of your Dectomax, where there's a certain amount of persistence there in the product. So just to kind of get an understanding of the different options that are out there, and then you can vary them to tailor for your own stock. So just a point I'm going to go through is the whole calibration, and so your dosing going, and I suppose why do we calibrate? So I suppose the most important thing about this, again, and Brendan alluded to it, is about dosing to the correct weight. And that the best rule of thumb to have is to dose the animals the highest weight in that category, to ensure that you're giving them enough, that you're not underdosing. Because again, if you're underdosing, there's going to be a certain amount of worms that are going to survive that dose and be resistant. They're going to go out, they're going to be excreted by the animals back out if they go back out in pasture, and you're going to have the problem then of them becoming a presence on your farm. So that's why it's very, very important to make sure what we're giving them is as much as we anticipate. So the calibration process is basically whether you have a graduated cylinder or whether you have a 60 ml syringe. Say, for example, a lot of us would have a 60 ml syringe handy. Get your gun and say we'll set it to 15 mils and just give it 3 squirts into your 60 ml syringe, and that should equate then to your 4x15, which is 60 ml, and it should be coming to exactly that. If not, you're going to have to I suppose tweak it a bit, or maybe you may need a new gun if it's not working effectively. And I suppose the benefit of doing it the four squeezes is that you're seeing, is it reloading correctly, and it's working effectively. So it's just very, very important that we don't underdose animals, that we make sure when we do treat them, we treat them correctly to maintain the efficacy of our products. So then just say the Drenched Test. It's another thing that I'm just going to briefly explain to people, just to kind of get an understanding of what you can do maybe to see, is products working on your farm? Because I suppose we're talking about products here. A lot of us mightn't necessarily know if products are working well or not. Animals might be thriving relatively well, but maybe the products aren't working as well as they once have. And you have to kind of look at your situation, see what's been your strategy previously, and do you need to start varying your products more. So the Drenched Test, basically just to explain it, is first of all, you're going to have to organize your equipment. So you're going to ring up the labs, first of all, to see are they available to take your dung samples for testing. And then you're going to gather the stock. So you're going to take samples from a certain portion of your calves in a group directly before and after you dose. And then what you're going to do is get them in 14 days later and take another sample off them again. In the case of your levamizoles, it'll be 7 days later you'll come in to take the sample, just to send them away and then see what sort of a kill did you get there. And you're aiming for that 95% kill for efficacy of the product. So just that it's something that's worth doing. If you have question marks, is a product working right for you, and you're still maybe, for example, an ivermectin, and you've been one who's used it kind of consistently, maybe it's time that you test it. And if it's a case where it's only working 50-50, and maybe it's time that you know that product isn't really working for you. Look, these Drenched tests, obviously you wouldn't go on one isolated time. It's worth doing it a couple of times just to get a fair representation of how the product is working. But it's definitely something worth considering if you feel you're having issues. So you send off those samples and see how you get on, and how the results come back. Semantic Resistance then. So suppose some practices on farm as in relation to, suppose, on farm every day, maybe more so on the grassland side of it. When you're letting stock back after you dose, ideally if you move stock back to a dirty paddock post-dosing. So just to explain what a dirty paddock is, it's basically any paddock that's in the rotation that's been grazed. It's basically anything that's not a reseed, or I suppose another example of a paddock that wouldn't be quite as dirty as ones that are in the whole grazing platform as such would be like your silage ground, which wouldn't be have the same burden on it. So I suppose the whole thinking behind that of moving them back to dirty pasture after dosing, it's kind of going maybe against what we would have historically done. And look, well and good, historically, we would have got the animals in, given them a dose, moved them straight on to say after grass, for example. And the tribe was exceptional. There was no doubt on production-wise, it was the right thing to do. But the problem was when we were given that dose to the animal and you weren't getting your 95% kills. Say, for example, we were back at 60%, as we've used ivermectin we'll use an example for a good few years in a row. The problem is when the animal's excreting, it's letting out the eggs onto the pasture, and of those worms that are actually resistant. And because it's an empty playing field as such, as we're on a silage after grass, they are in a great position to take over basically that sward and basically have their presence known there. And unfortunately, that is the problem that's there. So the advice would be to put them back to your dirty paddock for 2 to 3 days and let them excrete where there is a heavy burden of existing worms already there. So they're not going to take over as such, and to reduce, I suppose, the overall resistance on the farm. Again, reiterate the importance of dosing to that heaviest animal in the group. And if it's a case that you might be calving, the few cows, and it could be from January to June, and you kind of have a bit of a mixed bag, I suppose, as regards weights, you might consider splitting them in half and picking the few heaviest in each group, weighing them and dosing to the heaviest in each individual group if there is a big spread in different weights. Just on farm, it may be something that might be of benefit to you. Then I suppose another thing to look at is just, I suppose, to know your calf. So the type of stock is important too. Stock are going to have different susceptibility to worms. So like your single suckled calves, which are probably the more prominent at this part of the country in the northwest, do not usually suffer from gut worms because the cows act to reduce the worm challenge on the pasture. Now, naturally enough, they're obviously going to be getting a dose during the summer, but they won't have the same, I suppose, susceptibility as the likes of your dairy bred calves in comparison. However, like once weaned, they can suffer from high worm burdens, I suppose, as they have not been exposed to sufficient worms to gain immunity during their first grazing season. So that's where you have to keep an eye on them too, that they're going to be hit eventually. So just to be aware of that. Then look, I suppose what you're looking at is their last range. So you're seeing what are they covered for, and you're seeing basically weather conditions are very important. Like at this back end, we've had a very humid back end, great growth, but at the same time, worms will be still there. So we have to take that into account. So if it's a case you're given product, say maybe a month or so ago, you mightn't have full coverage as they're going in, depending on what product you've used. So you have to keep an eye on that to see, as you want to have them clean, say for the winter period. So then, look, I suppose as regards outwinter cattle, just to be aware of them as well. It's coming down to weather conditions. With humid weather, there is that tendency for them to pick up worms. So just to take note of that as well, that's very important to be aware of. I suppose quarantine treatment then. So look, it's important to dose with a product that is known to work on your farm and quarantine indoors. So that's where it comes back to the likes of ensuring that the products are working on your farm. And then again, I reiterate to turn stock out to a dirty paddock 48 hours post dosing. So very important to do that. Lungworm then, so it's also known as HUS. So symptoms are husky cough. So look, oftentimes a good way of kind of, I suppose, seeing this as an issue on farm, if you're going out to the likes of your stock and you're moving them from one paddock to another, the whole movement of stock, you kind of hear this kind of a husky cough coming from, and that's where lungworm is present, and it'll be time to go in and to treat. I suppose that's kind of the main thing we would be recommending, is to treat where symptoms are. It's not a case of treating because it's what I've done historically, or it's a habit I've done where I've treated animals, for example, 3 or 4 times over the summertime. It's a case of doing it when it needs to be done and keeping an eye on weather conditions and on burden on pasture. That's all the different factors you have to look at before you decide when you're going to dose. Because if you have a situation where you mightn't have stock on a very tight platform of a high stocking rate, you know, they mightn't be as open to worms as much as maybe a rotation with a higher stocking rate, where they're going back on themselves a lot more, and younger stock are picking up worms. If we just compare it back to the likes of our dairy bred calves, they are that bit more susceptible, because naturally enough, they're going to have more grass in their diet, as they're not getting the milk off the cow. So they are going to obviously, naturally enough, they're going to need that bit more dosing. So again, important to mix and match your active ingredients there, and to dose accordingly. As regards cows, then again, look, cows are usually not susceptible. Just to reiterate it again, I know Brendan touched on it, but we're avoiding the whole dosing of cows where we can, because they are building up resistance. They've been around the block for a few years, and or immunity, or should I say, they have built up immunity. And it's very important that really we don't, I suppose, use our products on them when they don't necessarily need it, you know. So that's a very important point. I suppose the whole basis is to use products when they're needed. How's a weaning with healthy lungs is key, just to ensure that you're actually going to get your return on your investment for that, I suppose, expensive window of the year, which is often quite a large window. So look, other, I suppose, secondary effects that can often come from lungworms, you can often get issues which can lead to pneumonia. So you kind of want to strike the happy balance where calves can develop immunity while not causing damage to the lungs. It's a bit of a balancing act. You do want them to obviously get that immunity as well. So you have to hit the happy medium while also maintaining performance. It's most prevalent from, say, June, July, depending on weather conditions. It can come on then into August time. And look, if it's a case you find it's been an issue on your farm, there is options out there. There's a lungworm vaccine, Ovilis Husqvac. Look, it's something that you would consult with your vet if it's a road you want to go down. But just to know it's there, and there's like some Repidose, a bolus for worms as well. But again, it's something you'd want to talk to your vet if you feel you're having that much of an issue that you need to go and push in more strenuous actions. There's just a picture there of some damage there done due to lungworm. So now as we come on to our stomach worms, so just the life cycle again, there's a diagram there. I'm not going to delve into too much detail, only just to get the basics of the way in which it works. It's a 3-week life cycle for a gut worm. So basically, as I was mentioning before, as the animal excretes, the eggs are in the feces, and basically it's at that third stage where the likes of those larvae start to migrate out of the dung patch. So whether it be from rain or whatever adverse conditions, it goes on to, say, the likes of the grass, and that's where you're going to get animals ingesting it and getting infected. Then the immature worms migrate into the gut mucosa, and these worms mature in the digestive tract where the adult worms lay eggs, and the process goes back again. So that's the way in which it works. Animals build up immunity to stomach worms. So if you have Coperia type 1, which is more so in season 1, and your Ostertagia type 2, season 2. Just an important point on it, as regards treatment, it's very important that your levamisoles be rare, that they're not effective against type 2. So again, as Brendan was mentioning earlier, this is the likes of your Levifast Diamond product. It's something that it's a product we need to protect, or Xanils, as we say. Very, very important to protect it. And look, there's no point using a product that, first of all, isn't even effective on what we're targeting. So like with the likes of your Ostertagia type 2, winter scour can occur in yearlings at late winter following their first growth season. So calves pick up these infected larvae the previous autumn, and if not treated, these immature worms remain dormant, so they're kind of inhibited, and before they resume development in the spring. So if present in large numbers, they can cause like depressed appetite and severe diarrhea. So it's important that we do cover that when we're dosing. Then just on the likes of, I suppose, again, return on our investment, I've mentioned the excess costs, naturally enough, when it comes to winter time. If we can take a look at Parasite Control overall, Brendan went through the likes of Fluke, he went through lice, and I've gone through worms. It's important basically that it's all covered for, and we get the best out of it, because, you know, I'm saying €6 there for all parasite control. Obviously that's going to vary from products to products. This is just a rough guide, say at say €6, but if we equate it back to say the loss in production, so loss of 0.1 kg per day over 140 days is 14 kilos, and that at €180 per kilo is €25. So that's a fairly substantial return on investment for having stock at the optimal level that we're going to perform for your thrive, and you're going to get reap the benefits from it. So that's definitely well worth doing. And look, as regards welfare of stock as well, it's very, very important to think of animals, and it's important that we have animals comfortable, and that they're happy animals are ones that are going to thrive, and they're going to perform for you and produce money for you on the back of that. Grassland management then, so just a couple of points on it. I suppose as you look on to the following year, like the leader follower, it's one that's more common on the likes of dairy farms, where you'll have an example of, say, the young calves leading, and you'll have your, say, replacement heifers following on and cleaning up after them, and it works well as the calves are selective grazers, and they get the best bite first as such. But I suppose if we can look at maybe on a suckler side, it's an option that may be there for farmers depending on their setup. But say if we take an autumn calver at this time, and say it comes to next March and he's weaning off at say 7-8 months of age, there may be a case there for doing a leader follower system, where he puts the calves out in front of the cows after a while, once they're weaned and sorted. You can have the benefits then with the cows, where they're following on and they're going to be cleaning off the pasture from the, say, the yearlings, as we call, or weanlings as we call them now, and it'll help have their condition right then for, say, the following calving season next autumn, where, you know, they're not on too good of a do either, and the weanlings are getting the best of the grass. So it's a couple of options there. You're basically giving the younger stock the best go of it, and avoiding them going into heavy burden pastures really, and having the older stock deal with that. Creep grazing again is another option for letting younger stock go ahead of, say, for example, like, so at this time of year, some lads would creep graze like, so that they're single suckler calves, just to make sure that they're going to thrive on well, and they may have, say, gaps in the likes of gates where they can have access to come back to, and it can be another part of the whole weaning process, and increasing that grass into their diet of the best quality that you have available for them. So a few options there. I suppose just to hammer home some of the do's and don'ts. So do's according to heaviest animal in a group. Consider spot dosing. If, say, you have an odd cow that you feel needs a dose, but again, we wouldn't be recommended dosing cows in general, as they built up the immunity. Don't rely on a single symptom to dose. So look, that's where it comes back to dosing when necessary, and not just dosing because it's what you always did. So don't move cattle onto fresh pasture after dosing, and don't dose cattle too frequently. So basically, we want to mind the products that we have there and the active ingredients that we have, so we can continue to use them for, I suppose, as long as possible, and that's in our own hands. Just some of the latest findings here. One of the researchers, Orla Keane in Grange, would have been involved in some of this. So just briefly, the efficacy of Bendazole, levamisole, ivermectin, and moxidectin were evaluated on 15, 11, 16, and 11 farms, respectively, for each of the different ingredients. So resistance in Bendazole was identified on 9 farms, which is 60%. So 9 out of the 15 were resistance suspected on a further farm. Resistance to levamisole was detected on 2 out of the 11, so 18%. Resistance to ivermectin was detected on 16, all of them basically out of the 16. And resistance to moxidectin, which is the persistent form of it for 4 weeks, was detected on 8, which is 73% of the 11. So you can see there, I suppose the message I want to try and give is that it is there resistance is building, all it can do, it can't unfortunately really get much better, but all we can do is slow it down. So the predominant generated detected pre and post treatment were Copirea and Ostratagia, with both genre detected post treatment with your Albendazole and ivermectin. So just, I suppose I'll leave it on that, just as I reiterate the importance of having our head in the game as regards resistance and slowing it down. So that's it. Thanks for that, everyone.
Okay, Joe, that's great. Thanks a million. You might stop screen sharing there, Joe. That's great. I'll just change the view there. Okay. Some questions in here now, and I'm just conscious of the time for the moment. Just a question there, maybe, Brendan. Just there's a farmer here. He says he's have a problem with lice with wanelings in straw bedded shade. Can lice come in the straw bedding that he's buying? And he says he has treated them with lime on their backs, which works for a few weeks. But he thinks the straw might be causing an issue. So, if you comment on that, Brendan?
Yeah, the straw isn't the issue. It's just the timing of the thing. You won't get lice coming in on straw. The natural population of lice on the animal will multiply, as I said in the presentation there. But just it's surely at the timing of housing, it's the same time that the animals are rubbing together, the same time that they're under the roof of the shed. They're probably lying against each other, so lice is spreading in that way. But you won't bring in lice with straw. It needs the host to come in. We have to just bear in mind that not every farmer has a slatted shed. You'd have farmers with dry stock on straw, but the answer is no, it doesn't come in on the straw. Now the lime thing is another issue. Now, I didn't bring it up in my presentation. The way it actually works is it dries out the lice. Now, there can be a question mark of whether it will affect sucking lice who burrow into the hide of the animal. And I know a lot of people use what's a hydrated lime is the type of lime they use. And they find it good in that it dries out the body of the lice and kills them that way. Now, there can be issues putting it on. It's fairly labor intensive. A lot of people will get the trowel, a builder's trowel, and work it into the hair of the animal, and also then of the actual animal breathing in the dust of the lime. Personally, it's up to yourself, but to buy a product, you can buy it cheap enough. Probably from an organic point of view, if you're not into insecticides and things like that, it will help. But there is the question mark of, will it affect sucking lice?
Okay. And I think it's worth reiterating the point. You said yourself, like, I think Joe said it, like €6 to cover an animal, and probably a lot less than that if you, as you said, shop around. I think we'd have to be very careful. We wouldn't be recommending anyone using lime. Like, if you look at lime, and it's another question there, a lot of farmers will use lime on straw to reduce to bring down the pH, so we've no bugs and we've no bacteria and stuff like that, and that's probably the proper environment for the lime to reduce any infections. Just maybe when we're talking about maybe the different, so there's a question there. Guys using sheep dip again, using it for lice again, and I'd assume applying with a knapsack or similar products. Would you comment on that one?
Yeah, I've actually used it myself. We have pedigree bulls at home, and it's fairly labor intensive. It does work. It's actually very good against mange mites, and you'll see a lot of mange mites, especially with the like bulls on the inside of the flank, that kind of way. But it's a two-man job, or a two-person job, I should say. Basically, in that you'd use the knapsack, you have to have gloves. Ideally, you want to plaster the animal and get underneath and around the animal, left and right. And the thing that we notice at home working it is, we'll say we have a left-handed crush, there's a wall down one side, you will not get the animal on the far side of the crush. So what you have to do is try and, if possible, put them in the opposite direction. It will work. It's fairly labor intensive. But it will work. You want gloves. You need someone else, a second person with a brush, to brush the dip into the hair. It's an old remedy. It does work, but you need a good bit of time to do a lot of stock with it.
Okay. Just you mentioned not using combi products there, maybe on cows. Can you just maybe quickly go through that one, Brandon?
No problem at all. The combi products kill both the fluke and worms. Now, if you have mature suckler cows, they should have built up the resistance over time, and there should be no need to treat them for worms. And now I'm talking about roundworms who are mature cows. I'm not talking about hooves or anything like that. So hopefully in that situation, you only need to kill lice and fluke. The combi product, if you keep using it, the problem is you're building a population of resistant worms. That's not a problem for the cow, but when she sheds those worms and things, we'll say, or the worms become resistant, it will affect the younger stock, and then you end up with a worm that isn't killable, if that makes sense, you know.
Okay. Just again, what's the best time to dose weanlings for worms? Should I dose after housing or allow them settle into the house and dose 2 weeks after housing?
Yeah, well, I'll take that one there. I suppose.
Go ahead, Joe. Yeah.
I suppose that's going to come. They're going to have to look and see what type of a product you're going to use. If you're going to use a persistent product beforehand, whether it be the likes of your Dectomax, for just as an example, that there'll be a 3 to 4 week persistence on that. So you could do it beforehand and before stock go in. But ideally, I would go either before or go after. I wouldn't do it on the day of bringing in stock, because there's enough stress going on with the animal at that time. So give them that time to suppose the change in environment and diet, and do them then afterwards if you're doing them with another product. Say whether it be maybe you might be doing a white or depending on your system, whatever way you're bearing it. But either one or the other, either side of housing.
Great. And there's just a question for maybe some organic farmers that are on. Do any doses qualify for organic beef? And you want to comment on that? Well, I suppose look at, I think some people may have the opinion that you cannot dose because you're an organic farmer. That is not the case. If you speak with your organic advisor and in consultation with your vet and with the organic organizations, you can carry out a herd health plan on your farm. And if you have a particular problem with fluke in an area and you're organic, of course you can deal with that, and that's all in consultation with your vet. There's no issue with that.
Just to come in there, James, if an animal is suffering, an animal has to be treated. And as far as I can remember now, don't quote me on this, I'd have to check it out. I think it's a case of doubling the withdrawals for specific products. But the important thing from an animal welfare point of view, if an animal has a fluke issue or a worm issue, of course they can be treated.
Yeah. Just a question here on ticks. There's a question: is there anything other than Baycol that can be used? I'm not aware of anything at the moment. Maybe I would say consult.
Click or maybe spot on that particular person. Ticks I would generally associate with red water and babesia, and generally the timing of red water from my memory is kind of May time and September. Now ticks are a big problem when it comes to red water. If you have to treat them, you're talking, we'll say if they do get red water, it's important just that I can remember, you treat them with imazole through your vet. And as far as I can remember, the withdrawal on that could be 7-8 months. It's huge.
Would there be is there a recommendation on the soil type for lime to be spread there?
Yeah, keep the population down. Like we'd always associate ticks with kind of white grass or rough ground. The other thing is that we'll say younger animals that are reared into that build up immunity, but it's the animal. Let's say if you're going out buying store bullocks or heifers and bringing them into tick ground, they can pick it up very quickly. And as far as I can remember, it takes 2 or 3 weeks for the tick bite to develop into the like a red water. But the younger stock should have immunity to it. Animals that were reared with it, but be careful on bought in stock. You're kind of throwing me with some complicated veterinary questions there. Yeah,
that's okay. Just a question maybe for you there, Joe. Can anthelmintic 15% be used on weanlings at housing? I had a purchased early in the year, but there's an expiry date of December 2021 on it.
So yeah, well, Sorry again. Sorry.
Expiry is not until December 21. So yeah,
it's no big issue once it's the expiry date. It's good on it. Yeah.
Just another one maybe for you, Brendan, on the Rumen Fluke. Does an animal build up resistance to Rumen Fluke after being affected? So
I would have my doubts on that one. I would check that one out. I'm not going to give you a false answer, and check it out and get back about that.
But if you were to assume it was the same as the liver fluke, similar, it wouldn't be building up resistance because you treat yearly.
I wouldn't say so. No.
Okay. I suppose just to remember, I suppose on it was a question on the sheep dip. It's important. It's not licensed anymore in cattle, so just to be wary of that going forward. Okay. But let's see just a few more. Does fluke affect thrive much? You know how, Joe?
Oh, it does. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe or Brendan.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, well, look, fluke is going to have adverse effects. It's often the immature fluke that's going to have a lot of effect on the overall thrive of animals. So, look, you can see it there in, I suppose, the likes of the beef health checks when animals are getting slaughtered, and you can see what sort of prevalence is there. It's basically just important that we keep it out of animals as best we can. And there's going to be certain parts of the country where it's more prevalent, and it's going to have to be obviously dose for more in those cases. But yeah, no, it's going to cause ill thrift, etc., and affect the performance.
And as Brendan said earlier, at a very expensive time of housing, you want to try and deal with those issues straight away if you can. Just one final one, maybe, Brendan. Just on it's maybe everyone like to know anyway. You know, the porons. Does cattle licking porons as a question? Is that a way of actually them licking some of these porons to get them into the system? Is that?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and you'll see individual and people talk about individual animals. If they're used with a poron, they will actually lick themselves. You know, it's amazing when you see a heifer or a cow throw her tongue. She can lick it herself. But yeah, definitely, yeah, it does affect it. Yeah.
Okay, and I suppose just finally to mention to farmers here, and again, there'll be a lot of people putting cattle in sheds. I think it's worth mentioning to everyone, you know, ventilation, currently a lot of people are putting in stock, and very mild weather this evening and yesterday, and mild at the moment. So I suppose good advice would be to open doors. You know, even if you're going to work in the morning and there's calves in a creep, open the door and put a gate across, the calves can't get out. You know, so just be very, very careful of pneumonia, and good ventilation in sheds. Gary Fisher dealt with it actually last week, but it's very, very important, especially at this time of year when weather is so mild. So Brendan, you just wanted to mention something there.
Yeah, just it's a little piece of information now, just to let people on the call know that Joe Mahon is heading for Pastures New, and this is his last public webinar here in Sligo. He's moving to Teagasc in Tipperary, which is closer to home in his native Offaly. He's a good hurler as well, he won't tell you that. I'd like to say he's been an absolute pleasure to work with. He's going in about a week's time. He's very popular with the Teagasc staff, the farmers, and also the students who he teaches. And on behalf of myself, my colleagues here in Ballymote, a good few of them are listening on the call, our Chief Agricultural Officer, James himself there, and the staff in Sligo, Leitrim, Donegal, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Joe for his hard work and dedication, and wish him every success with his new position in Tipperary. So thank you, Joe.
Okay,
thanks.
Here.
Appreciate that.
Thanks, Joe and Brendan. Look, I just going to finally say, I just want to thank everybody. We've a huge number of people on the call again this evening, and I really want to thank all the farmers that tune in every Tuesday for the last week and for the next 7 weeks. Huge thanks for all your support, because we try and cover topics that are important to you and that are relevant in your neck of the woods, and that's our role in Teagasc, and that's what we want to do. What I would say is maybe some people might think we mightn't be covering topics that they want. If you have an idea of a topic you'd like to get covered, drop us an email or a phone call, and we'll see can we do it in the springtime. One final thing, next week's there's a recording available of this, so if you need any more of this information, the recording will be available on our Teagasc YouTube channel. And finally, next week, very interesting, we have actually Conor Maguire dealing with nitrates regulations in terms of roadways and water courses. And we also have a guest speaker, Magella McCafferty from Arrivo, talking about drying off cows. So it should be very, very interesting. So good night, everybody. And thanks again to Joe and Brendan. So good night, folks.
Good night.
Good night.